Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining our user story webinar. My name is Samir Shah, and I'm the Chief Strategy Officer at Trax. And part of my responsibility with the company is oversight of our product management function. We're here today to share Pfizer's journey to a single source of truth for rate management. I'm joined today and excited to be joined today by Andrew Grass. Andrew, maybe it'd be good if you could introduce yourself to the audience.
Hi, yes, thank you, Samir. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. As Samir mentioned, my name is Andrew Grass. I am a manager of logistics platform services at Pfizer, and happy to be here to go through Pfizer's single source of the truth regarding Trax Rate Manager.
All right, thanks, Andrew. One quick note, housekeeping item for those before I start. After the presentation, we'll take any Q&A, Andrew and I will, from the audience. So if you have questions, please use the Q&A section of your GoToWebinar interface and type those in, and we'll get to those, as many of those as possible. A quick review of the agenda for today. I'll share a little bit about Trax, our history, and some key metrics about the company. I'll then go through the TSM platform, followed by the Rate Manager and its product vision. It's a key portion of what today's topic is. Then I'll give it over to Andrew, and he'll talk a little bit about Pfizer's user story and how both companies view Rate Manager as an essential piece of software in the marketplace. And then lastly, when Andrew and I were preparing, we thought it'd be good to bring things back into actual use cases that Rate Manager helps us solve. So we'll go through three kind of use cases for the audience, and that starts with data governance and quality, followed by supply chain volatility and single spot quote usage, and lastly, the impact to the carrier and LSP community. A little bit about Trax. And really, our goal is to enable our customers to better manage and control their transportation spend. The company was founded over 20 years ago in the freight pay and audit space, but in the last 5 years, we really have kind of evolved into that total transportation spend management category by adding software tools and services to our portfolio. Some key metrics about the company. We currently process over $15 billion of invoices annually, and that's across all modes and all volumes, and thousands of LSPs are supported in our network. We also support over 40 currencies in 120 countries, and we have people all over the world, here in the United States, in EMEA, in LATAM, and Asia Pacific, specifically for the Philippines and in China. And then our payment approach is agnostic. We do have a Trax Pay service that our customers leverage, but we also deliver pay files for AP services to ingest. In terms of the customer base that we support, we really do focus on the Fortune 100 and Global 2000 customer base. You see here some of the key verticals that we have, Pfizer being one of our largest customers in the life science space, but we also have a strong foothold in the technology, the retail, and the financial services sectors. Currently, of the Fortune 100, we have just shy of 20% of that are currently Trax customers. About our platform, as I mentioned earlier, Trax started a little over 20 years ago as a freight pay and audit provider, but our platform is all about transportation spend management. You can see that embodied here by our main tagline of see, save, and control. So kind of moving from left to right across this, we first start with rate management. And really here, everything's about creating a collaborative environment for rates and rate contracts to be managed throughout their entire life cycle. The Rate Manager product, which would be the main point of today, is the product that supports that capability. And we really do believe that's a foundational pillar of any type of spend management. Next is the freight audit capability, which those in the audience should be very familiar with. It's a best-in-class audit supported by our TTSM product. This product is a fully distributed cloud-enabled software that we bring to market. Next is the intelligence and analytics vertical, which most of our audience is very keen on, and I can't blame them in that regard. But from our perspective, in order to get to knowledge that comes from data, it really is important to have auditable, clean data coming in. Rate Manager is a part of that, and then having that clean audit feed the analytics engine. So some of the products that we have here are insights, variance analysis, sourcing and modeling through AI and machine learning, and we have an accrual product that we have as well in this vertical. And then lastly, we have our advisory services. What this represents is a white glove consultative approach that we have, staffed by a group of a bench of subject matter experts that we bring. A lot of our Fortune 100 customers, frankly speaking, are really looking for that partner to provide best practices and guidance around solving their challenges. And this group, in a consultative way, provides that capability using the tools that you see on the left. Now, today's focus is about Rate Manager, so I thought it'd be good for the audience to kind of hear a little bit about the product vision and see how we look at prioritizing features and functions as this product evolves in the marketplace. So you have three main areas here. The first one is seamless collaboration. We really focus on this area of bringing carriers and shippers together across all modes across the globe to provide them an area to work. And our rich history in rate management has created an environment where we have preconceived templates in all these areas to help facilitate that conversation, but we can also support a lot of customizable capabilities to make it unique to the enterprises and shippers that are and carriers that are involved. The next one is the single source of truth. This pillar is all about having valid rates and notifications in a single spot. What we've seen throughout the history is this information is always in disparate systems, and our goal here is to make Rate Manager the home for rate information and rate data. However, we fully understand that this information is needed by other third-party systems, ERP systems, TMS systems. There's a lot of other software that can use this information. So part of this pillar is for us to be fully extensible via APIs to allow us to push and pull data to those systems that need the information. And lastly is the empowered procurement. What we saw through the journey of talking to procurement professionals was that a lot of times they were very reactive to the situation. They were dealing with spreadsheets, a lot of manual processes. A lot of times they were always, from our perspective, a lot of times they were kind of on the back end of these rate changes. So we wanted to make sure that they had instant access and workflows that allowed them to come up that curve and be more proactive in their approach. What this is all driving towards from our perspective is the ability to model and simulate, almost a what if scenario. When my rates change, how does that affect my profile? And that's the ultimate embodiment of being proactive. So with that, I'd like to give it to Andrew to kind of go over Pfizer's story in this. We've been working together for a little over 2 years, and this journey has been one of product development as well as real pain points within the organization. Andrew, why don't I give it to you, and you can introduce yourself and go through what Pfizer's role in this was.
Great, thank you, Samir. So as I mentioned before, I work for Pfizer, and for those of you that don't know, Pfizer is a global biomanufacturing pharmaceutical company. Some key figures about Pfizer: they did about $52 billion in revenue last year, and we have about 42 internal manufacturing sites, and we have many, many, many more external manufacturing sites. We have about 88,000 colleagues located around the world. And within Pfizer, I'm part of what we call Pfizer Global Supply. And within Pfizer Global Supply, more specifically within the global supply chain, which is run by Tanya Alcorn. And ultimately, the group that I work for is intercompany operations. And intercompany operations might not be a familiar term within your organization, but basically what intercompany operations does is we're responsible for the physical and financial movement of products from our manufacturing, internal and external facilities, through our logistics centers, and ultimately to the markets where local logistical activities take place to get our products to the first paying customers. So within intercompany operations, we handle over 55,000 annual shipments. We have about 670 brands, 17,000 SKUs, and over 2,300 transport lanes. So that should give you some perspective of the complexity that we deal with on a day-to-day basis within intercompany operations. And as part of intercompany operations, we are, again, responsible for the financial and physical movement of those goods. So Samir, if you can take us to the next slide, please. So as I mentioned, within intercompany operations, I am specifically on logistics platform services team. And we are the team that handles the technologies that our users in intercompany operations use on a day-to-day basis. Trax, Freight Audit, and Rate Manager are part of those tools and technologies that we use. And really, these tools and technologies are enabling our people and processes through technology. So as you can see, there's just some quick tips and hints about what we do as a group, and that's the logistics platform services team. So if you could take us to the next slide, Samir, I can go into kind of our project and how we got to where we are today. So within Pfizer, we use a what, why, who, how storyboard to kind of kick off a potential project. So I'm not going to drain this slide completely, but basically what we were trying to do is identify a solution within the rate management process. And Trax was expanding their services to include an online rate management tool, which was very appealing for us to get in on the ground floor and help design that tool and what tools and capabilities it would have. And another area that was really appealing to us was the potential for sourcing. Because we have our freight audit data with Trax and now our rate management data with Trax, we can be quick and agile when it comes to procurement events to create extra value within Pfizer. So again, why we were doing this, really, as I mentioned, our team is responsible for ensuring that we have the best solutions to and tools and technologies within intercompany operations to leverage our human and technical capabilities. So that's why we went down the path with Trax. And finally, with the who on this slide here, DHL Global Forwarding was part of our project along with Trax and Pfizer. And the real reason for having a carrier on the project is because we viewed it as very pivotal to have input from all three parties, Trax, the shipper, and the carrier. The reason for that is the more that the carrier can buy into the tool, the usability and easeability of using that tool would allow them to be able to use that tool more efficiently and adhere to our governance within the process. So that's why we felt like it was very useful to have them have a seat at the table when it came to developing Rate Manager. So next slide, Samir. Thank you. So when it comes to the value proposition, I'll start from the left and work my way around. But really, these were some challenges that we were having, and we needed solutions for these. So what I'd like to do is just take a couple minutes and walk through each of these areas, just so you get an understanding of maybe the opportunity that we had here and really what capability we were able to deliver through some of these solutions. So the first one is the tiered rate approval process with notifications. So within Pfizer, we have a compliance aspect, we have a budgetary aspect, and we have a data quality aspect. So we needed to have multiple approvals on an amendment to make sure there was a written history of how that amendment was approved. So, you know, from a quality perspective, the routing and transit time and carriers that are used, from a budgetary perspective for budget variance and tracking, and for data quality to drive very good metrics on the back end. Another opportunity from a compliance perspective is we ask our carriers to adhere to specific routings and carriers within their standard operating procedures on specific lanes. So this tool would allow us to measure 5 options from a routing and carrier perspective and measure compliance to that. And again, moving pharmaceutical product, it's an essential that it arrives in good quality to give the patients exactly what they need. Another area that we wanted to enable through this tool, and we had challenges existing, was duplicate rates and also master data concerns. So within this tool, it will allow the system to prevent duplicate rates from entering in, and it will also ensure that the quality of data that we enable in the tool is managed through master data validation. So no data that's invalid makes its way into the tool, which again drives to better analytics on the back end. From a reporting and historical rate visibility, over the course of time, rates change, as everybody knows, and we wanted to be able to tell that story either in a positive light or in a negative light. So having the ability to report historical rates was important for us as part of the tool, and we were able to deliver that as part of the go live. Another benefit for us is to have all modes on a single standardized platform with the same workflow and same contract access, so that the carriers can see their rates, Pfizer can see their rates, and Trax can see their rates, enabling that collaborative workflow. From a dashboard and from a workflow prioritization, we have many users on the platform needing to use the tool, and our current version didn't allow us to segregate amendments within a certain user's book of business. So as part of this, we enabled a individual view of the platform, so a user knew what amendments were in their queue to do the review of. And also, we wanted an overall view of what that looked like. So we were able to build some dashboards that gave people quick insights to see what amendments they had to handle, and from an overall organizational perspective, how many amendments we had open in the system. Another opportunity we had was to have some enhanced parse structure and surcharge management. So within this tool, as Samir mentioned, there's customizable rate templates that allow a customer and a carrier to come to an agreement of what works best within that relationship. So this really gives us a lot of flexibility and also an enhanced surcharge management, which was really beneficial. And finally, from a spot quote process, we wanted to enable the ability to enter rates from a one-time single-use perspective without adjusting our existing reoccurring rates. And that was a big advantage of this. And when we move through some of the use cases, we'll explain that in more detail. Samir, back to you.
Let me just summarize from my perspective, you know, from the user story in terms of the customer problem, collaborative solution, and what we ultimately saw as the product. So, you know, as Andrew covered fairly well here, is that what they were lacking across the organization was that visibility across all their rates and across all their rate data, and a lot of manual processes that they were trying to overcome. From a solution perspective, they really wanted that shared visibility. Carriers and shippers and freight audit providers all having access to the same information, and any type of actual updates are orchestrated through workflows that could be auditable. And that was a key portion of the solution. So what did we, you know, kind of come to as a product, which is the Rate Manager solution? You know, that brings everything together into one location where we ensure that we have accurate and auditable rate information across all modes. We have that history, and it's fully traceable into who submitted it and when it was ultimately approved. So now that we've kind of given everybody a little bit of the history of where we got to, you know, when Andrew and I were preparing, we were kind of going through what would be relevant for the audience to hear from about how this product manages in terms of use cases in real business applications. So we thought of three main areas that we could speak to Rate Manager that I think would be applicable to most of you and your businesses. First one is the data governance and quality. Second one is supply chain volatility, which would be very applicable given what we're dealing with right now with COVID-19 and the increase of spot quoting, specifically single-use spot quoting. And then lastly, we want to make sure we explain the impact to the carrier and the LSP community of what this tool can do and how they can leverage it. So the first area is about data governance and quality. So in our mind, this is the taking from data and turning it into intelligence. The key point that we'd like to point for any type of data governance and quality program is that it's not a one and done occurrence. You know, clients are in an incredibly dynamic environment. Their shippers' profiles are changing constantly. They're expanding, they're contracting, their businesses are expanding and contracting, and their people are moving in and out of positions. So if left unchecked, this starts to deteriorate over time. So this is very much a do it once and then do it on a reoccurring basis to ensure quality. As we move left to right here, the first thing we talk about is our invoice and shipment data. So there's three main elements how we look at it in terms of quality. First is to, you know, analyze if the data is coming from an electronic format. You'd be surprised how many data sources are not coming that way, and that leads to a lot of error. The second is the monitoring the data quality. So from what we tend to do is create a dashboard that has metrics that show you your data quality, and that distills into what we call a quality index that lets you compare to where you are now and ultimately where you should be with your data. So you're always measuring. And then the last one is to understand the gaps and work to iteratively resolve it. And we almost look at it from a perspective of you should not trust data that you're not using. So there's always an opportunity to take data that you're not using and remove it from the environment. That all feeds a normalization process, which we don't normalize across every data field, but we do focus on a lot of the key ones, including charges, addresses, equipment types. The goal here is to deliver the most efficient audit that we can create. And Rate Manager really does fit around that audit box, as it's another source of data that's making sure things are adherent to the most recent information. Once we have a clean audit, the settlement is the next piece. And in order to deliver a good settlement outcome, you know, we're paying to ERP and AP systems that there's no room for error. So this recipient of good quality data needs to be at a high level and needs to be measured so that we can make sure that we deliver that quality information output. Business intelligence is in the same category, where it's ingesting that quality outcome of the audit and the invoice data and trying to allow our customers to make good decisions based on that. So for us, this is a journey, and a lot of times, it starts in various places, but rate manager is a key part of that. Um, Andrew, when we were talking, you mentioned how this may apply in the Pfizer use case. Maybe you could share how this framework applies to your business.
Yeah, thanks, Samir. So I think it relates really well. And again, a key deliverable as part of our project was around data governance and quality. And this tool certainly delivers. I would agree with Samir. I mean, from our perspective, we enforce requirements within the invoices that allow us to enable the audit. And once we have the invoice data normalized and in a way that is able to connect to our rate manager, we then leverage the data quality that's enabled through the rate manager tool to make the audit as efficient as possible, as well as enable it to drive as much savings as possible through that solution. The other area that we see from a data governance and quality perspective is we run a lot of metrics off of rating data and our elements in Rate Manager. So with the quality of that data needing to be pristine to drive analytics on the back end, this tool really enables us to set values that are allowable within some of our custom fields to ensure that an amendment won't even be able to get into Pfizer's system without them meeting those requirements. So all of that being said, we also like to run metrics and KPIs within our processes, and some of those revolve around Rate Manager. And some key metrics that we're enabling through this tool really revolve around cycle time. I mean, when you think about it, a carrier wants to get a rate submitted so that they can move shipments for Pfizer. So we need to make sure that organizationally and individually we have good cycle times on our amendment approvals. We also want to see what type of amendments are being submitted. Are they adding rates? Are they trying to update rates? Did they make errors and now they're trying to correct things within Rate Manager? So we want to see that type of visibility. And also around our mode mix. What type of amendments are driving the most volume within the platform? Is it air? Is it ocean? Is it truck? The tool enables us to get to some of those analytics. And then finally, a really important one is around rate expiration. This rate expiration enables us to be ahead of the procurement cycle and understand what rates are coming up to be expired so that we can have those procurement discussions well in advance of a rate ever expiring. So we're not running into any situations where we have an invoice held up because the rate has expired and now we have to start that process late in the game. So again, from proactive rate management, this tool really gives us that advanced visibility to see what's coming down the pike to be able to make those procurement events as valuable as possible.
Thanks, Andrew. So the next area for us to kind of investigate as it relates to Rate Manager is around supply chain volatility. As I mentioned earlier, with COVID-19, we're seeing very much one of the most volatile supply chain times in at least in our lives. And what we're seeing as a freight pay and audit provider, transportation spend management company, is the increase of spot quoting during this time, specifically single-use spots. So with that increase of volume, we're seeing the rate management tool be, again, another pillar to be able to coordinate that activity. When we were talking earlier, Andrew, again, very specifically mentioned how this is impacting his business. And Andrew, why don't you walk us through your workflow and how you're being impacted by the current volatility that we're facing in the market?
Yes, Samir, I mean, I couldn't agree more. It's been a very challenging time across many industries. And, for us specifically, our products can't stop moving because it does impact people's lives and health. And amongst the situation, this pandemic, we really need to make sure we're getting products where they need to be. So that it's a big part of what we're trying to do. And the inception of this really wasn't a disaster tool that would allow us to predict events like this happening and can control rates. But its inception was built on lanes that we had moving on an infrequent basis that it was advantageous for us to spot quote those lanes because we didn't have the needed volume to get good competitive rates. So it allowed our freight forwarders to quote them on an as needed basis. Again, from a pharmaceutical perspective, sometimes we had critical shipments with patients in need. So we would have to have critical shipments that were exceeding their service level agreements. So we would allow them to charge additional compensation if we were requesting them to move it at a higher service level. And finally, which relates to COVID-19, we also have, like any other shipper, we do have capacity issues from time to time on specific lanes. So within those capacity constrained lanes, it allowed our forwarders to be able to quote us on a single use basis without altering our reoccurring rates, and it would allow us to see what that deviation from the original rate was from a budgeting perspective, so we could communicate internally the impact to these variations that we had. So given the current environment, we are experiencing a lot more of these single use because of the capacity situation with airlines not running commercial flights, limited number of flights where we really have to, compete with a limited number of capacity, and those rates now are more expensive. So this tool really allows us to control that. And as you can see from an approval process, really our LSP is initiating that amendment. Our team reviews it from an administrative and data quality perspective. It then would go to our budgetary owner so they can see what these COVID-19 additional rates and charges are being assessed. And then finally, when that product is moving from a compliance perspective, the team from logistics solutions and compliance can determine if it's moving in a compliant manner. And again, that's part of that tiered rate approval process. And again, for us, we see these as three key areas, but you can have many more than three approvers, or you can have a single approver. The tool does not have a limit to the number of approvals that can happen with an amendment. And that's the cycle that we go through on a reoccurring rate basis and also in these single use spot rates.
Thanks, Andrew. So I think when we were talking, we thought, this is a good pictorial of how the process works. We thought it'd be relevant to bring up an actual example using the tool. So let me kind of walk you through how this would happen in real time. What you're looking at now is our Rate Manager software. Strictly speaking, Rate Manager is a SaaS-enabled tool that is capable of being standalone, but we have it as well pre-integrated with our Freight Pay and Audit software, our TTSM software. So you're seeing our environment here where everything is pre-integrated. Up top, you have your main dashboard, your draft, your expired rates, and all of your rates, as well as search capability. So for this example, let's walk you through one actual spot quote and how we would manage it and how Pfizer would manage it, or any enterprise user that was using it. So we have our Ocean template here, so we'll click into that. We're looking at here all of the different types of charges, including, so freight and spot rates are both together in the same location. So the first one you see here is our pre-carriage, and that's our origin to loading port. We see our main carriage, which is our port to port, and we see our on-carriage rates, which is our discharge port to door. So if we were to go into, as well as the spot capability. So if we go into the on-carriage, for example, you can see all the different fields that are there, including the discharge port and the destination, and we're able to go and scroll and to the right and see the rates as well as any other details. Now we have up to 50 customizable fields. As I mentioned earlier, we do have templates for different modes and different geographies that we do allow our customers to benefit from. But in the case of very customized rate templates, we have the ability to see those here and make customizable changes to the columns and the data that's actually in the system. So another avenue is that we have role-based approvals. So right now we're currently as a submitter. So let's go through maybe an example as a submitter of submitting a spot quote. So if we go ahead and add a spot quote, we'll create some language around what it is, which is a one-time spot, urgent, ship today. Again, all this is tracked with the actual quote. We have the ability to upload a file for all your rates. So you can do this in bulk or as a single use. This allows you to, on the other side, you can download it, but you can also push it back up depending on how many you have. You can also edit any particular spot quote in the tool, but you have both flexibilities. And we have the effective date range, which is not so useful maybe in a spot quote example, but this capability is here to put some kind of constraints on when it starts and when it ends. So we'll go ahead and click continue. So now what you have here is your raw template of your rate and your spot quote. So we'll go add a row to it and we'll click into it. So another benefit of Rate Manager is that a lot of the key fields are created as mandatory. Why does this matter to you? Well, in a lot of cases, rate information is ad hoc and not always complete. So we want to ensure that we have complete data in the system so that we can not only audit against it, but have the ability to trace what happened. So we'll go ahead and type a quote here. Now this spot quote number is an alphanumeric field, so you can create a unique ID for your company, but you can also use something like an invoice number or whatever methodology you use for spot quotes. So there's a lot of flexibility there. These other fields, depending on the customer and what you have populated already, can pull up in a menu option, so you can quickly go through key ones. For an origin city, we'll just say Hong Kong. And we have our country that we can put in and select. And we'll say the shipment's going to San Diego here in the United States. And we'll pick an amount. So for this case, we'll say that's $15,000. And we'll say this is COVID-19 related. I'll go ahead and click apply. So now you have your spot quote in the system. The next step from our perspective is to push this to somebody to actually approve. So we'll go ahead and hit continue. We'll add any final comments. And all this is carried with it. So you notice here the approval timeline. Again, we're still under the submitter role, and you can see what was put in there by the user. In this case, I'm the generic user in the system, as well as what any comments that were there. So now we'll move to the other side of this, which is the approver. So from an approver perspective, they have the same approval timeline that you see here, except they're getting it from the person submitting. But up top, you see a couple options, including you can reject it, you can approve it, and you have the ability to approve and forward to another user within your organizations. I think Andrew captured it well. This iteration between shipper and carrier can happen numerous times. So there's no limit to how many times you go back and forth in the edits, but every step of the way is traced for you to go back. And a future enhancement that we're working on for the product is the ability to attach documents in. So any type of other materials that you want to include will be able to upload in the system. So for this example, we'll go ahead and approve. We'll say we're approved for usage, because remember, I'm an approver at this point. And we'll go in. Now this is active and now in the system. So it went from what was pending to now all of our rates. So if we go into the Action Ocean example and we go to our spot quotes, we'll see here the top line was just created in our system. It has our Hong Kong to San Diego line at $15,000 and all the details that apply around it. Now what else is available in the system? If we go back out, we can search for that particular lane. So if we want to find it, is this all incorporated? We can see here we have two examples that we created, but this top one, I believe, is the one that we just created. And so we have everything that's there and searchable. So we have our quotes. So now with all this there, we have also the last kind of key element of this, if we're looking at all of the rates, and this particular spot quote is the actual amendment history. We covered this a little bit before, but as an approver now, we see all of the history for this particular spot quote and others that are in a system, and we can actually have that traceable for us to report on if needed. So future capabilities, what we're looking at as a company is leveraging this as a RFP, RFQ capable tool. You can probably see the benefit, and customers have definitely showed us where that benefit lies. That is a capability we believe is the next step for us. So there's a power for shippers and carriers to be able to interact in this tool to deliver that type of rate management and bid process management. So anyway, that's an example of the tool, and hopefully that made sense and was applicable to your business. I'll move us to the next example, which in our story here, which is really around LSPs, and I'll turn it to Andrew here.
Great, yeah, Samir, great demo. I think it really shows the power of the tool. So thank you for putting that together. I think it's really valuable to show that. So again, as Samir mentioned, really we wanted to also highlight the impact to carriers and LSPs. As I led off my piece with DHL having a seat at the table, it really was crucial. And I think for us, the transportation industry advances when all three parties from an audit perspective are aligned, and Rate Manager really enables us to do that because we have one single version of the truth. And at the end of the day, when we have an exception within an audit, we can go back to Trax Rate Manager. And as a carrier, if your system deviates from what we see in Trax Rate Manager, an amendment needs to be submitted to align that. And again, as a collaborative approach, the shipper would have ultimate authority to do that final approval. And it's another connectivity item that Samir mentioned, that if you are able to connect with Rate Manager directly, it really does limit the systematic discrepancies between your system and Rate Manager. So that single version of the truth really plays out really well. Another advantage is really improved billing accuracy. I mean, at the end of the day, everybody seeing the same version of that truth enables us to have less deviations from our rates and really drive in a really efficient audit process that we have. Again, as I mentioned, DHL as a partner, I mean, they were really instrumental in providing the carrier side of the table when it came to developing Rate Manager. So from a feature perspective, as well as easeability of the tool. I mean, at the end of the day, we really wanted to make sure that this product was scalable across customers and across users within their organization, that you didn't need a big learning curve to get in here. I think when we kicked off this project, we really likened this tool to an iPhone or a smart device that are out there. I mean, as you can see, kids can pick up these devices and use them within a short period of time. And we really wanted to develop that tool that people could get in here, and the functionality was so intuitive that a big training wasn't needed. So DHL really helped validate that process. The other piece of this is, you know, the workflow perspective. As I mentioned earlier, from a compliance perspective, we need many approvals on some of these rates so that we have data quality approved, we have budgetary accountability approved, and we also have the compliance aspect from a routing and carrier perspective approved. And you can see that on reoccurring lanes and as well as spot quotes, and it really shows a clear history of how that negotiation happens systematically. So we really get away from, you know, emailed approvals where it's really hard to pull back together the story. As Samir mentioned, extensibility to other systems, I mentioned it as well. You know, having that single version of the truth and connecting with this collaborative tool is a real big benefit. In fact, Pfizer connects with this tool to have our Rate Manager data delivered into our SAP tool, so that we have the ability to do to connect that data to other data attributes that we have within SAP, and that process works really well. So again, another use case of a successful project here that delivers that extensibility. And finally, you know, as a carrier, it unifies rate management and billing across you as an LSP. So I think that's really beneficial, because if you can standardize some of these tools across your organization, you can really leverage the power of this tool. So, you know, I'll sum it up here. Really, the reality is that we really wanted to make this very carrier friendly, and we think that there is an opportunity where if you as a carrier have a customer that doesn't care as much about rate management, you can take this as a tool and use this, and again, maybe push it the other way. Instead of coming from the shipper to the carrier, use it as a tool for yourself to really use Rate Manager as a vehicle to get, you know, better compliance to rates, and making sure we bridge that story with Rate Manager. So again, these are some areas we think the carriers would really benefit too as well from Trax Rate Manager. Samir, any other comments on that?
No, I appreciate that, Andrew. I think on that last point, the last couple points, again, the extensibility we've seen be powerful for our enterprise partners and customers. You know, they view that the ability to get that data to other systems is key. And then, as Andrew mentioned, for the LSP community, you know, what we notice is that a lot of times the billing stations, as we worked with, you know, various carriers and LSPs, those billing stations have a lot of disparate systems that are running those updates. So there's a real opportunity there to drive uniformity, ultimately leading to a better outcome for both shipper and carrier in this case. So we see a lot of potential for this tool, and hope that the audience kind of sees where the power is going to be. So again, Andrew, thank you for joining us. And for everybody that's on the line, we really appreciate your time. Thank you for coming, and we'll open this up for any questions that are there. All right, Andrew, we have one that's come up right now. I think it's related to FAP. So the question is, do you need to leverage Trax's FAP service to benefit from Rate Manager software? So I'll cover that one. The short answer is no. Rate Manager is capable of being a fully standalone software, SaaS software that people can use. Now, the benefit of pre-integrating it with our FAP environment is you get all the benefits right out of the box in one place. But strictly speaking, that capability is available for you to use in other systems as well. All right, another one, Andrew, that's come in, I think it's related to you, is, you know, you share with us a process flow, but from a real-time perspective, how is Pfizer interacting with their carriers to update them and train them on how to use the software? How's that gone for you?
Yeah, again, I think it's gone really well, and I think again leads back to the easeability of the tool, where any user can get in there and it's really intuitive to use. So it wasn't a big change management process on our side. We went from only having our team from a logistics platform services accept all rates to being able to train our users and our carriers pretty seamlessly. And like anything, there is a change management process in a training, but the documentation that Trax has developed with the tool really helps stand it up, to roll that out across your carrier base and your internal users.
Andrew, I think we have another one for you. So this one is about your mode profiles. They're trying to apply this information to how their business operates. Again, at a high level, what is a mode profile that Pfizer leverages, or what mode are you most leveraging, and how do you prioritize that?
Yeah, Samir. So we use truck, we use air and ocean through our global freight forwarders. We also have an ocean liner direct contract with them, and we also have some European truckload carriers as well that are on the tool. So I think the biggest advantage we have with the tool is, again, some of those custom templates allows us to really focus mode specific on each of those modes, and gain the most value out of that with custom fields, with custom surcharges. And in fact, as the demo proved, really having this parse structure has proven a lot of value, because you have the different segments, a pre-carriage, a main carriage, and an on-carriage, all in the same contract, and being able to piece it back together. So I think, for us, we have all three modes, but I don't see any advantage to one mode over the other. I think the tool does a really good job across all modes.
Next question comes in. Does your tool allow you to do scenario planning for things like tariff and rate updates? Good question. What we are driving towards with the product is to integrate with the what if capability. So this is a roadmap item for us, but we see very obviously from our customers and people we've talked to in the market that that's a need that's out there. So if a rate is updated, take my existing profile and apply that, and kind of give me some feedback. So that what if capability integrated with Rate Manager is definitely a roadmap item for us. There was even an example of one of our recent customers where there was a tariff that was applied to the Chinese goods, and a senior management team came to our connection and said, what is the impact to our spend? And they were ultimately able to get to an answer, but it took multiple days and multiple conversations to get all the various pieces of the information. And what that customer fed back to us was, if I would have been able to answer that on that Sunday when that executive called me very quickly, it just would have led to kind of quicker decision making, and hitting that Monday morning kind of with the ground running. So that was an example of where Rate Manager would have been able to help us at least understand the impact of the tariff and any surcharges. Next question is, can I use Rate Manager for my upcoming LSP RFPs, and how would it facilitate it? So from the Trax perspective, I mentioned it a little bit in the vision. Currently, the tool is being driven towards that capability. We have APIs that come in and out, but what we also see as a need in the market is to be able to leverage this as a single shop for RFP bid and bid process. So that would include the workflow back and forth between the shipper and the carrier. But the obvious power in the whole thing is that when there are approvals, or when a bid is accepted, that rate is then quickly applied and can be applied to their FAP process. So by doing this in an integrated fashion, there's a lot of benefit from that capability. Andrew, this one's for you. It's a little more generic, related to COVID. How is companies like Pfizer dealing with carriers as it relates to COVID-related surcharge and shipping? And does Rate Manager help you de-risk the situation at all?
Yes, Samir, great question. And I think I alluded that a little bit when we talked about the single-use spot rate. I think it's been a great tool to be able to take a shipment by shipment approach on these things. Again, different countries are experiencing different levels of impact with COVID. So some have more regular shipments, others it's very difficult to get capacity into a specific market. So with that tool, it allows us to get the visibility and the approval to see that in the system, and allow us to ultimately get to a point where we can partner with Trax to develop better analytics on the back end to be able to take these single-use spot rates, compare it to our reoccurring rates, and really let Trax drive the analytics to this. As Samir mentioned with his example regarding an executive needing data very quickly, at the end of the day, related to COVID-19 or any situation that comes up, having the ability to connect these single-use spot rates in a pandemic like we have right now and identify the cost impact of this is very useful to explain to upper management why we're deviating from our current budget. So it is a strong tool to be able to support changes in rates due to the current COVID situation.
And the last question we'll go to here is around, does Trax have any customers deploying Rate Manager now during this pandemic? Yes, we do. We have several large enterprises that are currently coming in live and leveraging this tool. When they initially kind of wanted to go live with Rate Manager, they had a lot of need around unifying their rate management software. But especially with the volatile supply chain that we're living in right now, these customers are on the front end of starting to leverage the tool, as kind of Andrew alluded to at Pfizer. But we're definitely deploying customers, and we're doing that right now during this current environment. So again, thank you everybody for your questions. If we didn't get to them, we'll follow up with an email, but we really do appreciate your time. Andrew, we really appreciate you and your time, as well as Pfizer being willing to participate. So thank you again, Andrew.
Thank you, Samir, and thanks everyone for participating as well.
Have a great day and great rest of your week.